What if I told you a woman walked into a job interview, got humiliated, belittled, and kicked out, only for everyone to find out she was married to the man who runs the entire company? This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about perception, prejudice, and the quiet power of grace under fire. Her name is Maya, a stunning, soft-spoken black woman in her early 30s, dressed modestly, carrying no designer bag, no flashy title, just confidence. But what happened next? It tore through layers of bias, shook the walls of a corporate empire, and reminded us all of one timeless truth. You never know who you're really talking to. Stick around, because by the end of this story, you'll either be cheering or furious. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a woman whose quiet presence seemed to halt the rhythm of the lobby. Maya stepped out, her stride steady and composed, her figure wrapped in a simple but clean cream blouse, tucked into navy trousers. Her natural curls were pulled into a low bun, minimal makeup highlighting her smooth skin and striking, intelligent eyes. Around 30, with the kind of beauty that didn't shout, but lingered, Maya exuded a quiet confidence that didn't rely on labels or trends. Yet as she crossed the gleaming marble floor of Aureus Tech's headquarters, heads turned, but not in admiration. Behind the sleek glass desk, the receptionist, a young woman with sleek blonde hair and a curated wardrobe, looked up, her eyes traveling from Maya's modest flats to her fabric tote bag. Her smile was tight, professional, but thinly veiled condescension curled beneath it. "Can I help you?" she asked, already assuming Maya had entered the wrong building. Maya returned the look with grace. "Yes, I'm here for the 11 a.m. interview. Administrative support role. My name's Maya." The receptionist's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Her expression flickered. "Oh, I see. One moment." She tapped in a few keys, glanced at the screen, then gave a short nod without looking back up. "Have a seat. Someone will come get you." The tone, though technically polite, made it clear. She didn't expect Maya to belong here, not in this glass and gold world of tailored suits and iced matcha lattes. Maya thanked her softly and took a seat near the tall windows. The lobby, awash in natural light, was impeccably designed to impress. But the chill in the air had little to do with the air conditioning. Several employees passed through, their eyes skimming past her like she was background furniture. One assistant whispered something to a colleague, glancing Maya's way, then chuckled under her breath. Maya, unfazed, folded her hands in her lap and waited. Calm, observant, and already aware she was being measured by the wrong metrics. The door to the inner corridor finally clicked open, and a young assistant with a clipboard emerged, calling Maya's name without much interest. "This way, please." Maya rose, offering a quiet smile, and followed her through a long hallway, lined with frosted glass offices. They passed a lounge where a group of other candidates were gathered, young, stylish, loud with laughter and confidence. Designer bags slung casually over chairs, fingers adorned with trendy rings, resumes clutched in sleek leather folders. The room smelled like expensive perfume and unspoken competition. Maya's entrance shifted the atmosphere. Conversations didn't stop, but voices lowered subtly. Eyes flicked her way with barely hidden amusement. She walked in with the same quiet dignity, chose a seat in the corner, and opened her canvas tote to check her resume. Across the room, a woman in a bold red blazer smirked. "Lindsay." She glanced at Maya, then turned to the woman beside her with a theatrical whisper. "It's so interesting how some people interpret the dress code, but I guess comfort is a kind of confidence too." The others tittered. Maya looked up just long enough to meet Lindsay's eyes, then looked away without comment. Her face remained serene, but there was something about the way she sat, upright, unshaken, that unsettled even those who thought they had the upper hand. Lindsay wasn't done. She leaned a little closer, her voice honeyed with artificial warmth. I hope they don't think we're all interviewing for the same role. I mean, no offense, but there are certain expectations in a modern office, especially here. Maya turned to her finally. Her gaze was calm, unreadable, but behind it, there was steel. No offense taken, she said softly. Expectations reveal more about the ones who hold them than those who don't meet them. Lindsay blinked, unsure whether she'd been complimented or insulted. Maya returned to her resume, unmoved. The air in the room cooled, and for the first time, Lindsay had nothing to say. Maya's name was called again, this time by a different voice. A man in his late 30s, with a clipped tone and restless eyes. Follow me, he said, barely making eye contact. She rose, gathered her things, and walked into a glass-walled conference room where 3 people waited, seated in a semicircle. A perfectly coiffed woman in her 40s, with a thin smile and sharper eyes. Camilla, head of HR, a tall, impatient-looking man in a slate-gray suit. Derek, the admin manager, and a younger man with a quiet air and watchful gaze. Tom, from the operations team. As Maya sat down, she could already feel it in the air. The rehearsed politeness, the rigid body language, the quick, assessing glances that lingered a second too long on her outfit, her skin, her calm. Camilla launched in with a smile that never touched her eyes. So Maya, you're here for the administrative coordinator role? Maya nodded. That's right. I've reviewed the job description and believe my experience aligns well. Derek glanced at her resume, then exchanged a look with Camilla that wasn't meant to be noticed. Camilla's smile tightened. Let's talk about adaptability. In a fast-paced tech company, cultural fit is everything. We thrive on energy, initiative, and appearance. Would you say you're current? The pause was deliberate, the implication clear. Maya answered evenly. If by current you mean adaptable, capable of learning fast and grounded in integrity, then yes, I'm current. Tom tapped his pen gently, studying her. Camilla didn't look impressed. You've worked primarily in the nonprofit and education sectors. This is a different beast. Very forward-thinking, very modern. Maya smiled politely. That's why I'm here, to grow in a new environment and bring a fresh perspective. Camilla leaned forward slightly, voice firmer now. And what about your professional image? We take that seriously here. Representation matters, you know. It was barely veiled. Maya's heart tightened, but her voice remained calm. I agree completely. I represent myself with professionalism and authenticity. Derek chuckled softly under his breath, as if that response amused him. Camilla opened her mouth again, but stopped, then leaned back, her decision already made. Let's be honest, Maya. I'm not sure you're the kind of energy we're looking for. You seem comfortable where you are. Maybe too comfortable. Tom shifted in his seat, visibly uneasy, but said nothing. Camilla stood. I think we've heard enough. Thank you for coming in. It wasn't a conclusion. It was a dismissal. There was no invitation to ask questions, no handshake, no courteous promise of a follow-up. Just the clipped finality in Camilla's tone and the hollow quiet that followed it. Maya stood, smoothed the fabric of her trousers with the same grace she had walked in with, and offered a nod. Thank you for your time, she said, her voice steady, warm, but distant, like someone who had already withdrawn herself from their small, cold world. Tom avoided her eyes. Derek gave a perfunctory smile, the kind that didn't reach beyond his teeth. Camilla had already turned away, scribbling something onto her clipboard, as if Maya had already ceased to exist. As Maya opened the glass door, the air outside the conference room felt heavier, almost judgmental. The sound of her own footsteps down the hallway felt sharper than before. She passed the waiting area where Lindsay still sat, scrolling through her phone with one leg elegantly crossed over the other. She looked up, caught sight of Maya leaving far too early, and her lips curved into that same smug half-smile, the one reserved for people she thought had just learned their place. "That was fast," Lindsay murmured, just loud enough. Maya didn't stop, didn't flinch. She glanced at Lindsay only once, meeting her eyes not with anger, not with embarrassment, but with something deeper. A serene defiance, a quiet power. It was the look of someone who knew exactly who she was and didn't need anyone else to validate it. She pushed the glass doors open and stepped into the sunlight, her back tall, her gaze forward, her dignity untouched. They had dismissed her, yes, but not broken her. Not even close. Back inside the polished tower of glass and metal, Camilla returned to her desk with the air of someone who had completed a necessary task. Unpleasant, perhaps, but justified. She was updating the internal notes on the interview slate when her phone lit up, vibrating insistently across her desk. The name on the screen made her stomach lurch. Richard Johnson, CEO. Her polished composure cracked, just enough for her hand to falter as she answered, voice tight with rehearsed professionalism. "Yes, sir?" Richard's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Cold, measured, dangerous. "I'd like to see all department heads and HR leads in the executive conference room in 20 minutes, he said. "We need to review a specific interview that took place this morning." Camilla straightened in her chair, nerves prickling beneath her silk blouse. "Of course. May I ask which candidate?" There was a pause. Then, in a tone that gave nothing away but said everything, he replied, "You'll know when you see the footage." The line went dead before she could respond. Camilla sat frozen for a moment, the weight of something unspoken pressing into her chest. She hadn't seen Richard in person for weeks. He rarely involved himself in day-to-day recruitment matters. So why now? She replayed the morning in her mind, flipping quickly through the list of candidates, and then, like a thread tugged from a seam, her thoughts stopped on Maya, the plain woman, the one with the calm eyes and quiet grace, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. She had barely registered Maya beyond the surface, had dismissed her without a second thought. And now, Richard Johnson wanted a meeting about a candidate no one had cared enough to remember. Until now. The executive conference room, usually a space of polished confidence and soft laughter over catered lunches, now throbbed with an anxious, sterile silence. The department heads filed in one by one, their smiles clipped, their greetings curt, sensing the gravity of what was to come. Camilla sat at the far end of the table, her legs crossed too tightly, her fingers interlocked over a notepad she hadn't yet touched. Derek walked in minutes later, brows knitted, sipping coffee like it might shield him from accountability. Tom entered quietly, a neutral expression, hiding whatever thoughts stirred behind his eyes. The room quieted the moment Richard Johnson stepped inside. No announcement, no assistant flanking him, just the CEO, tall, composed, impeccably dressed, with an air that silenced air itself. He took a seat at the head of the table, placed a slim black folder in front of him, and looked up. His eyes scanned the room like a surgeon, evaluating a body before an incision. "I've received a troubling message this morning," he began, voice low but carrying. One of our interview candidates walked out of this building humiliated. I've reviewed the candidate's background, credentials, and the notes in our system. What I see doesn't match what I've heard. A long pause followed. No one dared to speak. I want the recording pulled, the full interview. I want us to watch it together. Camilla's spine stiffened. Sir, do you mean the administrative support candidate from this morning? There were several interviews. Richard raised a hand. The gesture was gentle, but it ended her sentence with the finality of a gavel. Her name is Maya. That was all he said. The name dropped like a pin in a cathedral. A quiet murmur swept the table. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his earlier smirk now nowhere to be seen. A tech assistant rolled in a screen, already cued with the security footage. And then they watched. They watched Camilla's dismissive body language, the clipped interruptions, the derision laced in professionalism. They watched Derek's forced chuckles, Tom's silence, and the coldness that filled the air around Maya, like smoke. They heard the exact moment Camilla said, "You're not a cultural fit," and how Maya, beautiful, composed, undeniably qualified, simply nodded and thanked them. They watched her walk out with dignity through a lobby, too blind to recognize it. When the clip ended, no one moved. The stillness was so complete, it felt like the room itself had stopped breathing. Richard didn't speak right away. He let the silence make its own accusation. Then, slowly, his voice came like a verdict. "Maya is my wife," he said, calm, clear, controlled. "And this morning wasn't just an interview. It was a test. I asked her to go through our hiring process anonymously, to see if the values we preach in public hold up behind closed doors. What I saw today disgusted me." Camilla's face drained of color. Derek's coffee cup clinked softly against the table as he set it down, hands suddenly trembling. Richard didn't shout. He didn't need to. His words landed like thunder, wrapped in silk. If this is how we treat someone who walks in without status or flash, what does that say about who we've become? No one answered. There was no defense to be made, just the sound of shame tightening its grip on the room. No one spoke. The echo of Richard's revelation still hung in the room, like smoke after a fire. Thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Camilla sat frozen, her perfectly tailored blazer suddenly feeling too tight, her mind spiraling through excuses that all crumbled under the weight of reality. Her breath caught when Richard reached for the remote and pressed play again. This time, he fast-forwarded to the exact moment she cut Maya off, mid-sentence, then again to the smirk Derek gave when she dismissed her, then finally to the cold silence that followed Maya's graceful exit. "This," Richard said, voice low, "is the culture I've trusted you to build in my absence." His gaze cut through Camilla like a scalpel. You saw her skin, her clothes, her silence, and you decided she was small. He turned to Derek. You saw someone being minimized and chose to laugh. Then to Tom, who had remained stoic, his jaw clenched. You said nothing. That's its own kind of choice. Tom finally broke the silence. "Sir, I should have said something. I should have—" "Yes," Richard interrupted, but without cruelty. "You should have." He looked down at the table, his voice tightening. Maya didn't come here for privilege. She came because she believes in accountability. She thought, perhaps naively, that this company still reflected the values we built it on. Camilla opened her mouth as if to explain, but Richard didn't let her. "You don't get to speak yet." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The control, the disappointment, the unshakable clarity in his tone made it clear. He was no longer asking questions. This was judgment. The room remained quiet, but the energy had shifted entirely. This was no longer a meeting. It was a reckoning. Richard leaned forward, eyes locked on Camilla. You've led this team for 4 years. During that time, complaints about bias, gatekeeping, subtle discrimination, they've trickled in. I let them slide because I believed you were competent. I believed you cared. He exhaled slowly. But watching how you treated the most qualified person to walk through those doors today, that belief is gone. Camilla's throat tightened. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was small. Richard, I didn't know. You didn't want to know. He snapped, for the first time allowing emotion to crack through his calm exterior. You saw exactly what you chose to see. Derek looked down, shame burning across his face. Tom, still quiet, finally spoke again. She deserved better. We all know it. Richard gave a small nod. Yes. And now we deal with the consequences. He stood, gathering the remote and the folder. Effective immediately, Camilla. You are suspended pending a full investigation into discriminatory practices within your department. Derek, your conduct today will be reviewed alongside previous feedback. Tom. He paused, his voice softening a fraction. Thank you for finally speaking up. It was late, but it mattered. Then, as he prepared to leave the room, Richard turned back, his final words slicing through the silence like a blade. Maya didn't want to expose anyone. I did. She only walked in. You're the ones who gave yourselves away. And with that, the door clicked shut behind him, leaving the room colder, quieter, and far more honest than it had been in years. The aftermath wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. Within hours, an internal memo was circulated, brief and sharp. Camilla was suspended, pending investigation. Derek was placed on administrative review. The HR floor, once a hive of polished confidence, felt subdued, brittle, like a shell hollowed out by waves too many times. Camilla packed her things with trembling hands, escorted by a compliance officer who avoided eye contact. No public scolding, no shouting. Just silence and the weight of everyone watching, pretending not to. Derek tried to keep working, his fingers hovering over his keyboard, but the glances from colleagues pierced deeper than any reprimand. Every chuckle he'd shared at someone else's expense, every sidelong comment about culture fit, they all echoed back now, in unbearable clarity. Tom, on the other hand, didn't speak much, but when Richard stopped by his desk that afternoon, the message was unmistakable. Richard didn't offer a smile, just a brief nod, and the kind of look that said, you didn't save the day, but you might still matter if you learn from it. And that alone was enough to make Tom sit up straighter. The company's diversity and inclusion team, once underfunded and symbolic, was immediately overhauled. A task force was formed, not just for optics, but with power. Hiring oversight, mandatory training, and anonymous feedback systems that couldn't be buried. Richard appointed a new interim head of HR, someone with a history of advocacy, not just policy. Maya, meanwhile, stayed quiet. She didn't grant interviews or respond to LinkedIn messages flooding in after someone leaked what had happened. She let Richard and the systems speak for themselves. But her presence lingered in the office like a haunting grace. Unseen, but unforgettable. People whispered her name like it was a secret and a compass. At an all-hands meeting the following week, Richard stood before his staff, not as a CEO, but as a man deeply aware of what had almost been lost. This company, he said evenly, was built to disrupt systems, not replicate their injustices. What happened to Maya isn't just a Maya problem. It's a mirror. And now we've all seen our reflection. There was no applause, just a long, charged silence, not of fear, but of reckoning. And in that stillness, something new began to take root. When the dust settled, when policies were redrawn and empty apologies had run their course, Richard sat across from Maya in their quiet kitchen, hands clasped, voice low. You could take any role you want, head of operations, VP of culture, anything. They'd line up to have you lead. He wasn't offering her a favor. He was acknowledging her strength, her grace under fire, her right to rewrite the rules. But Maya only smiled, that soft, grounded smile that never tried to impress, only to be true. I don't want a title handed to me because of what happened. I want to work like everyone else. I want to earn trust, the same way I demanded respect. In silence, with action. Richard knew better than to argue. He only nodded, pride flickering in his eyes, and watched as she picked up her mug and walked to the window, the light casting gold across her cheekbones. The following Monday, Maya returned, not to the top floor, not to a corner office, but to a modest cubicle on the third. She was now officially a project coordinator, assisting a team she didn't lead, among colleagues who didn't quite know what to say. There were stares, awkward pauses, even some resentment from those who felt she belonged elsewhere. Higher, flashier. But Maya didn't flinch. She arrived early, stayed late, offered help without fanfare, and gave credit without hesitation. She didn't correct the whispers or defend her choices. She simply worked, quietly, consistently, excellently. Over time, the resentment gave way to admiration. People began seeking her opinion. Teams shifted their tone when she entered a room, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. When someone asked her during a lunch break why she hadn't taken the executive role, she answered between bites of her sandwich. Change doesn't come from above, it comes from beside. And I want people to see that you don't need a title to lead, just courage to show up as yourself. In a world obsessed with power plays, Maya chose presence, and in doing so, she redefined what power looked like. 6 months later, the office felt different. The hallways held less tension, the break room laughter wasn't as nervous, and new hires spoke up without glancing over their shoulders. Change didn't roar. It crept in quietly. One policy, one conversation, one difficult truth at a time. At the center of it was Maya. When the company launched its new diversity and inclusion initiative, there was only one name unanimously nominated to lead it. Not because of her connection to Richard, not because of the scandal, but because everyone, from junior interns to senior executives, had watched her turn humiliation into momentum and silence into strength. Maya didn't celebrate the announcement with confetti or speeches. She simply said yes and got to work. Her first action wasn't to draft a memo. It was to walk desk to desk, ask people what they needed to feel safe, seen, and respected. She listened more than she spoke. She brought together people from all backgrounds, not to check boxes, but to build something real. And when Lindsay, the once smug and polished candidate from the waiting room, now a junior marketing assistant, finally worked up the courage to approach her, it wasn't with arrogance, but uncertainty. I wanted to say I was wrong, she stammered, eyes lowered. Back then, I didn't know who you were. Maya smiled gently, folding her arms, not out of dismissal, but out of quiet understanding. It's not about who I am, she said softly. It's about what you choose to see. Word of her leadership spread quickly. Other companies asked her to speak, not just about diversity, but about humility, about dignity, about the quiet revolution that happens when people are given a chance to be whole. Maya never bragged. She didn't need to. Her presence, measured, warm, and unwavering, shifted rooms more than titles ever could. On the wall outside the newly renamed Equity and Belonging Department, a plaque was installed, not with her name, but with her words. Respect is the only thing that never goes out of style. And every day, Maya passed it, not to admire it, but to remind herself that leadership was never about being above. It was about walking beside. So when Maya walked out of that building for the first time, head held high after being dismissed, she wasn't just an applicant walking away. She was a storm quietly gathering strength. She didn't raise her voice, didn't seek revenge, and didn't ask for sympathy. She simply let the truth speak for itself. And in doing so, she exposed the rot behind polished smiles, the bias hidden beneath hiring policies, and the danger of assuming someone's worth based on how they look. Today, that company is different. People are different. Because Maya didn't come to destroy anyone. She came to rebuild something better. She chose integrity over ego, compassion over control. And maybe that's what true power looks like. So next time you meet someone, ask yourself, are you seeing who they really are? Or just who you've been conditioned to believe they are? Because respect isn't earned through titles. It's revealed through how we treat those we don't understand yet. And Maya? She didn't change the system. She became the reason it had to.